Welcome back. In this lesson we're going to be looking at how to use manipulatives to help us multiply out fractions. With these manipulatives we're going to get the answers, and from there we're going to find a pattern to help us do it so we don't have to use manipulatives eventually. But these are always a way to back up and understand why multiplication works the way they are. So we're just going to go over this shape here represents 1. We have this shape here as half because half of it fits into there. We have 1/3 because 3 of these fit into there. We have 1/4 because 4 of these shapes fit into my original, and we have 1/6 because 6 of these shapes fit into my hexagon, and then we have 1/12 because 12 of these shapes fit into my hexagon. So let's take a look at our first question here. It is saying 1/2 multiplied by 1/2. Another way of saying multiplication is of. So half of half. So if I think about that here, I have a half, and we want half of that half. So half of that half, well, we need two things to fit in there. We look at these quarters here, 2 of those fit in, so 1/4 is half of half. So this one here is equal to 1/4. If I were you, I would write that down. Copy down the question and write down your answer of 1/4. Okay, let's look at my next one. For the next one, we're looking at 2/3 of 3/4. So let's get 2/3. Here's 2/3. Oops, sorry, 3/4 first. We're going to go 3/4 because we want 2/3 of 3/4. So we're going to first get 3/4. Here we go. And now I want 2/3 of this 3/4. So if we remember from before, 3/4 could be 12s, right? Because we want to break them down into thirds of this. So each quarter is made up of 3 of these 12s. So we go 1, 2, and then 3. Okay? So we want 2/3 of each of these quarters, and there's 3 of them. So 2/3 of each of these quarters is going to be 2 of these here. Okay, it's going to be 2 of these. Each of these are 2. So we have 3/4, so we're going to have 1, 2, and then 3. So altogether, I look at this, this here is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6/12. Oops, sorry. Yeah, 6/12. Okay? So let's think of what's happening there. Copy down the question, think of what's happening. So we know what multiplication means. It means something of something, like 3 groups of something or something of something. Here we're saying fractions of something. Notice how, so far, my answers, when I multiply 2 numbers less than 1, it's getting smaller. That's another thing to pay attention to. Let's try my next one here. We're going to go 3/4 of 1/3. So we have 1/3, and we only want 3/4 of it. Well, 1/3 can be broken into quarters with these little 12ths. Because I look at this here, and now this is separating this third into quarters. Right? And we want 3/4 of this 1/3. So 3/4 of it is just going to be that. So this here is 3/4 of 1/3. So if we look at that to this, that is 3/4 of the blue shape. So my answer for this one is going to be, we have 1, 2, 3, 3/12. So I would copy that one down and see what we have. Okay, make sure you write these under because we're going to find a pattern here soon. My next question is, we have 1/3 and of 1/4. So we're looking at 1/4, and we want 1/3 of 1/4. So start off with the 4th. Okay? Now I want 1/3 of it. Okay, so let's go. Here we go. 12s, we need 3/12 to break this into thirds. So this shape here breaks it nicely into thirds. And we only want 1/3 of it. So we only want 1 of these. So let's remove the rest, and that there is 1/3. So my answer is 1/12. Okay? Let's try this one here. This one's a little bit tricky. So we have 1 and 1/3. Okay? And we want 3/4 of that. All right. So instead of this here, I'm going to look at how many thirds we have. So 1 and 1/3, I like to make these first into improper. So that's the same as, well, this here, this 1 is made up of 3/3, right? Because we want to look at common terms here. We don't talk about apples and not apples and oranges. So I have 3/3 right there and another one. So this is altogether the same as 4/3. Okay? So really I have 3/4 times 4/3. Okay? So I want 3/4 of this. So each third can be broken down into 12ths. So 4 of these 12ths, right? So if I look at this, here is a 12th, and there's 4 of these that go into one of these thirds. So we want 3/4 of each of those third. I'll move that there so we can see. So we want 4/4 of each of those third, or 3/4 of each of these thirds. So that's going to be 3/12. So it's 3 of these guys here. So I have 3, right? For each one. So there's 1. Let's replace this one here with another 3. There's 2. Place this guy here with another 3. And then the last one is this one here, the fourth one, with another 3. Because we wanted 3/4 of each one. Okay? Now, if we combine all of these together, we have altogether 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12, oops, and this was here. We have 12 twelfths. Because remember, these were there. So that's equal to 12 twelfths. And that's essentially equal to 1, because all of these will fit in to make 1. Okay? Just keep going. Like this. You can make them together so they end up making one of those there. A 1. We just keep this up. This eventually will make a 1. So right there we have half, and that's using 6. So that's the same as the red. Then we have another 6 to make the 1. All right. Let's take a look at my last one here. We want half of 2/3. So we have 2/3, and we want half of it. Well, this green thing is half of it, right? And the green thing is also equal to 1/6. The green is half, and it's also equal to 1/6. So my answer is 1/6. So using these shapes, that's great. You're probably thinking, hey, that's good, Mr. Fody. I got these shapes. They're going well. You know what? I could get the answers with that. But when we get into bigger, more complicated numbers, that's not going to be as easy now, is it? So we have to figure out what is the pattern happening here. Math is a lot about patterns. So patterns can help us figure out rules. So let's, here, I have this already done for you. Let's zoom in a bit and look at these here. So let's look at these shapes here. So first, we look at this, we have 1/2 times 1/2 gives me 1/4, which simplifies to 1/4, right? Well, if we are to look at that, look at these yellow ones. What do we do to get 1? We could divide, we get 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. We can multiply, 1 times 1 is 1. So both of those work. Now let's look at the blues, the denominators. Well, 2 plus 2 gives me 4, and 2 times 2. Interesting. So let's look at this next one here. Look at my yellow highlighted ones, my numerators. So 2 and 3, what combination of that gives me 6? Well, 2 times 3 gives me 6. Let's look at my denominators. 3 times 4 gives me 12, doesn't it? That's the only way 3 and 4, combining them together, could get 12. We keep this up going all the way down, and we notice something. When we multiply our numerators together, and we multiply our denominators together, that's the same thing as multiplying two fractions together. So whenever we are multiplying fractions, all we have to do is multiply the numerators together and then multiply the denominators together. And another thing we also must do is we must first change them into improper fractions like we did here. And we kind of showed that with the shapes. It was a little bit confusing to do that with whole fractions, two different things. We wanted all the one set here the same. This was the 1 1/3. So we want to convert it to 4/3 and improper before we did it, and it just made it easier. Now the same idea is here when we're looking at these, when we do the calculations. We want to first convert them into improper fractions, then multiply, and then at the very end we simplify to get our final answer. So that's the whole idea of multiplying fractions.